We're going all the way back to 1987, folks. This is, I guess you could call it season 24B? Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and for today's Big Finish review as I make my way through the back catalogue is the 7th Doctor Adventures Wicked! Exclamation point is not optional. So almost for the entirety of the time that I've been reviewing Big Finish on this channel, they've been looking quite far into the lifespan of the 7th Doctor. We've had the 7th Doctor, played by Sylvester McCoy, post-Ace with Harry Sullivan and Naomi Cross. We've taken a look at his last day before the events of the TV movie. We've seen him travelling alone prior to the events of the TV movie. It's been a while since we've had a dedicated box set where the 7th Doctor has been travelling with Ace, played by Sophie Aldred, and the goal of Wicked is to take us way back to the very start of their relationship, where the 7th Doctor has just said goodbye to Mel, has said hello to Ace, and the Wicked box set takes place between season 24 and season 25, between Dragonfire and Remembrance of the Daleks, with the first story, Backwards and in Heels by Alison Winter, taking place literally as soon as Dragonfire is ended. The first scene is Ace dropping off her bags inside of the TARDIS console room. So as you'd expect tonally with late season 24, early season 25, we're dealing with stories with a lighter tone. We've got a trilogy of stories here, the aforementioned Backwards and in Heels by Alison Winter, The Price of Snow by Catherine Armitage, and The Ingenious Gentleman by Alan Ronald. These are 3 two-part stories. They're essentially hour-long stories, starring Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred. Like I said, Backwards and in Heels has Ace dropping off her bags inside of the TARDIS, and we actually get the rituals that were denied for Ace back in 1987, where she learns that the Doctor is a Time Lord, where she learns that the TARDIS can travel in time, because yeah, in Dragonfire, she never actually learns that the police box is also a time machine. But unfortunately, their trip to the 12 galaxies to be home in time for tea is gonna have to wait, because the Doctor gets invited to a semi-regular alien treasure hunt. The treasurer, in this case, played by Paulo Vieira, is looking for the Flower of the Void, and the Doctor is competing with other treasure hunters to try and track it down first. So the Doctor and Ace land in 1926 Soho to try and find this flower, and there they bump into Lucien De Luca, played by Luke Barton, who is a human from the far future and is an old competitor of the Doctor for these treasure hunts. The Doctor and Ace get separated in Soho, and it's a race against time to track down this Flower of the Void so that the Doctor can use it for good purposes.
Wicked! We're really here! I'm back on Earth.
Does it feel like home?
Home, but not home. Better than home. Is that a flock of sheep in central London?
Yes. Very helpful creatures. Nature's lawnmowers.
They mow the grass? That's handy.
Right. Rules of time travel. Do as you're told, don't wander off, and don't give people information about the future.
What, like, don't mention the war?
Not funny. The world has gone through hell.
Sorry. I thought the 20s were all dancing and roaring.
They're in recession. The impact of a war and a pandemic. But the general strike next month.
Oh.
Now listen. This door's locked. It's very important no one gets in who shouldn't.
Right. Don't want anyone nicking your wheels.
Ace, my TARDIS is a gateway to the entirety of time and space, not a Robin Reliant. And voila.
You're giving me a key.
It's also a sanctuary. This is no game. This is business. Nasty business.
The first act of Backwards and in Heels is really strong, where the Doctor and Ace have these really unique interactions that, yeah, Ace was denied back in the late 1980s. And while Sylvester McCoy is really good in this story, I think Sophie Aldred, I don't know how she does it with her voice, because if you hear her regular speaking voice, she does sound older than she was back in the late 1980s, but she's able to make her voice sound younger to replicate a 16-year-old Dorothy McShane. And there's some really great dynamics and back and forth as Ace tries to figure out who is this stranger who I have now basically saddled up with on these adventures? And the immediate awe that Ace has with the Doctor and the TARDIS and time and space, that starts turning into suspicion as she starts distrusting the Doctor because of the format of this treasure hunt, where Ace thinks, I've basically just traded in Sabalon Glitz for the Doctor, just another person who's obsessed with treasure, who is obsessed with money, and the Doctor has to convince her that he's not like that. Ace just thinks that she's traded one prison, Ice World, for another, the TARDIS. And that's a really great starting point, but then the story, in my opinion, doesn't really build on those foundations, and it seems to abandon its unique selling point by separating the Doctor and Ace so that they hardly spend any time with each other for the duration of the story, which I think is a massive missed opportunity, as the Doctor essentially trades Ace for another pseudo-companion for this story, Lucian. And, you know, Luke Barton does well in the role. He sounds an awful lot like Harry Sullivan, but he's just not that interesting of a character, so I don't understand why we've replaced Ace with him for this story in order to pair him up with the 7th Doctor to do this treasure hunt. Couldn't the Doctor and Ace have just done this treasure hunt? Ace gets her own subplot where she bumps into this other woman from 1920 Soho and her police officer on-again, off-again boyfriend, and honestly, that's not very interesting. Like, I think it's a cool way to flesh out the setting of Soho, and you've got the really fun callback to Backwards and in Heels, but maybe you could have replaced the Heels with Doc Martens or something. That might have been the cooler, more Ace McShane way to take this. But as the story progresses, you realise that it's basically abandoned what made this setting, what's made this box set so conceptually interesting, and that's the Doctor and Ace's teething troubles with their relationship. Now, that wouldn't be so much of an issue if it was replaced by something far more interesting, but it really isn't. Because we're spending so much time with Ace, Wendy, and the PC, it means that we're losing the intricate details of this treasure hunt that the Doctor and Lucian are doing, so we kind of get like half servings of both, culminating in a really ho-hum ending where, honestly, it's kind of hard to understand what's even happening, because the voice filters that they put on the Treasurer make it so hard to understand what on earth he's saying that I just wouldn't be surprised if people listening to this have no idea what happened in the 3rd act. Conceptually interesting, but it just seems way too much in a hurry to abandon its USP. But let's move on to the next story, The Price of Snow by Catherine Armitage. So the Doctor and Ace land in 2076. They're in France. They're at Val du Campbell, which is a European ski resort, and it's the only one in Europe that has real snow. It initially seems like a cool place for some rest and relaxation and fun skiing holidays and snow jumps and such and tobogganing. However, people are going missing. University students who are at the campus are going missing. So the Doctor and Ace have to team up with Teddy, who's a university student there, played by Tom Alexander, and ski instructor Vari, played by Sophie Kennedy Clark, to figure out where the missing holiday makers are going, and also discover what is the shimmering, shadowy shapes that are underneath the impossible snow.
Teddy Watson Smythe, may I introduce my good friend Dorothy Ace McShane, commonly known as Ace.
Hi, Ace. That's a fun name.
Is it?
Shall I, get us some drinky poos?
Actually, Ace was.
Bar's over there.
Cool. Back in a tickety-boo.
That wasn't very friendly.
Good. I don't want to be friends with the likes of him.
What's wrong with Teddy? He's been helping me.
People like that only help when there's something in it for them.
Oh, good, you're still here. I'll never get used to these people. They pay that much money for a lesson and don't even bother to show.
This is Vari, Professor. She's been teaching me.
Nice to meet you, Vari.
Likewise. Your girl's annoyingly good. Took me months to get so settled on a board.
She picks things up fast, especially when those things are dangerous or explosive.
Much like Backwards and in Heels, The Price of Snow has a really cool setting. With the ski resort setting of Val du Campbell, it made me think, has there been another Doctor Who story, even in the expanded universe, let alone TV, that has been set on a ski resort? And I don't think there has been. And you get this really cool setting where it's the place to be for the 1% of the near future. A place that shouldn't even really exist, with climate change and the sun being too hot, but somehow the snow is authentic. And you have the 1% making up the patrons and the holiday goers churchgoers and the working class workforce who keep Vaudu Campbell operating. However, also like Backwards and in Heels, it's a brisk 2 parts, meaning that we don't get that much depth when it comes to the supporting characters. I think Tom Alexander and Sophie Kennedy-Clarke are having fun with the material, and Tom Alexander in particular is really fun as a posh university student who's really leaning way too much into the role. But outside of those roles that they're playing, I didn't think there was much more depth to the characters. There is an interesting commentary on how class roles are very easy to adopt and fake, at least for a time, at least up to a point, and it does end up teaching Ace a lesson on who she can immediately trust, and that what matters is what people do, not necessarily where they come from. And I can always get on board with a serial where the moral of the story is that the ultra-rich are literally less than human, you know, all fine by me. But when The Price of Snow has to start unveiling its cards and revealing what these mysteries are leading up to, I just found myself really confused. I don't know what the main villain's plan was, and I don't know why he needed to kill hundreds of people in order to make it work. Like, killing your customer base, I don't think that's a good idea. I will say though, for this story, I really liked the music by Jamie Robertson. It was propulsive and percussion heavy, very reminiscent of Kath McCulloch's work on Remembrance of the Daleks and Silver Nemesis and Battlefield, basically the best soundtracks of season 25 and season 26. And there is a really fun Cool Runnings homage in the third act that I really appreciated. And in terms of the meta text, there's a perfectly timed reference to the Jamaican bobsled team of the 1988 Winter Olympics, which was early 1988, which means that if this had been, for example, the season opener of season 25, it means that the Winter Olympics would have broadcast between Dragonfire and this story. So nicely done, Catherine Armitage, I see your game there. But it's got a really muddled and confusing third act when it comes to the villain, and there's just not enough time in these brisk 2-part stories to really flesh out the supporting cast to a satisfactory capacity. But let's see if we can improve on things with the third story, The Ingenious Gentleman by Alan Ronald. The Doctor and Ace land in 15th century Spain, and there they discover Don Quixote, as in Don Quixote, the Ingenious Gentleman of La Mancha, the fictional character created by Miguel de Cervantes and played here by Simon Callow, and joined by his squire Sancho Panza, played by Echo Cuarte. Essentially, Don Quixote is part of the long tradition of the Doctor meeting fictional characters who turn out to be real, like Robin Hood, Father Christmas, William Shakespeare, etc. And the Doctor is a proper fanboy for Don Quixote. However, the TARDIS is stolen by a walking windmill. That is something I just said, and it's up to the Doctor, Ace, Don Quixote and Sancho to figure out what is this ancient evil that's about to envelop this town in 15th century Spain.
Come, foul enchanter! Art thou too full of fear and cowardice to face me in thy true form? Open this door and step out from your infernal carriage!
Your Grace, you have been knocking for some time. Perhaps the enchanter is not home.
I shall not be deterred. Open this door by order of Don King.
Oi, do you mind? We're having an argument in here. Buzz off.
Face me, villain!
Whatever you're selling, we don't need any, okay?
Step aside, fair lady. My quarrel is with Tristan.
Eh? What you on about?
Ace, who is it?
My title is none other than Don Quixote de la Mancha.
Dan Coyote something something.
That doesn't make any sense. Hello, I'm the Doctor, and this is Ace.
Tristan, we cross paths at long last. I insist you step outside and face me with honor.
Now for me, The Ingenious Gentleman is the standout of the Wicked box set, and a big part of that is the dynamic between the 7th Doctor and Don Quixote. I don't really know anything about Don Quixote. I don't know much about the story or any of the lore, for lack of a better term, behind the books. I know that it was basically one of the first proper novels ever written, and it's inspired works like The Three Musketeers and basically fiction of the past 500 years more broadly. But in terms of the specifics, I don't know anything about that. Thankfully, for me at least, least, the Ingenious Gentleman does give you the brief lowdown, and if there is some sort of in-joke, if there is some sort of character beat or reference that we're meant to get and understand, or a certain part of the lore, or these key elements of the character, it does elaborate them and it does point out what they are and how they're important. And because the Doctor is a fanboy of Don Quixote and apparently would read his stories on Gallifrey and would inspire him to want to do good and never be cruel and cowardly and all this good stuff, it means that the Doctor is on hand to fill the audience in. And it's a fun comparison here to have Simon Callow, who played Charles Dickens in Series 1 of Doctor Who, where the Ninth Doctor was also a massive fanboy for him as well. But it seems that one of the key priorities of the story is not necessarily to compare the Seventh Doctor and Don Quixote, it's to compare Ace with Sancho, where Sancho is Don Quixote's squire and basically just gets into all sorts of shenanigans and trouble and gets injured and is the butt of many jokes, at least as far as my understanding is. And Sancho looks at Ace and is like, oh, you're the Doctor's squire. And Ace hates the comparisons, but she can't really refute it. And that's a really interesting starting point. And then that's kind of all the story does, because Ace is knocked out and is unconscious for half of the story, so I don't get why they did that. If this box set is meant to be analysing the early relationship between the Seventh Doctor and Ace, why are they separated so much, and why in this story is she unconscious for half of it? I'm sorry, did I misread the brief of Wicked? I don't get why you have this opportunity, you have this setting, you have this character dynamic, and you're just refusing to explore it. Like, isn't that the brief? Isn't that the point? I'm just more confused than anything. Thankfully, The Ingenious Gentleman is entertaining, but it also has the exact same issue as the other two stories, where the third act, when it comes to the villain, is really confusing and I don't know how the villain was defeated, and the villain was also really, really lame. But thankfully, the supporting cast in The Ingenious Gentleman are way better defined, probably because they are fictional characters with a baseline already, and they're more meant to be representations of the Doctor and Ace more than anything else. Although they that kind of undersells it. They are still fully fleshed out characters in their own right in this story. And also Simon Callow is just ridiculously entertaining as Don Quixote. He's throwing so much enthusiasm at it, and when he proclaims his name and his title, it's just funny every time he does it. I was so entertained by him in this story. So thankfully, The Ingenious Gentleman does end the Wicked box set on a high note, but all three of these stories have the same issue. They start off really strong, really great settings, really great ideas, and then it proceeds to sort of abandon the brief. Like, it seems that they're almost unwilling or unable to tackle the early Seventh Doctor and Ace dynamic in any meaningful way. Like, I know there's only so much they can do in terms of the specifics, in terms of the lore, but in terms of the character work, like, I feel like all three of these writers, no disrespect to them personally, obviously, and it's just my opinion, but I feel like all three of them left so much on the table here when it comes to the Seventh Doctor and Ace. Like, this more innocent time in their travels before the Doctor starts becoming the Machiavellian schemer across season 25 and season 26. Like, it pays lip service to those ideas, especially in Backwards and in Heels, but then all of the stories make their way to the third act with really pants villains across the board. Like, all three stories really let down the side when it comes to the villains for really confusing and convoluted endings. Like, honestly, this is kind of rare and unique, where three stories written by three different writers with three very different settings and ideas all have fundamentally the same strengths and weaknesses. But overall, would I recommend Wicked? Like, if you're a Doctor Who 7th Doctor completionist, like, this has been out for a couple of months already, you've probably already listened to it. But if you haven't listened to it already, I don't know, I think it's a bit hard to recommend, because if you do want an early 7th Doctor and Ace, you technically get it, you just don't get the interesting character work that would go along with that. Or at least the implied character work that this pairing in this particular part of their lives would imply. And if you want really good 7th Doctor this year, listen to Past Forward. Go further back and listen to Far From Home. Or listen to Dark Gallifrey Missy, or listen to his Krillitane story from Classic Doctor's New Monsters. The 7th Doctor, for all intents and purposes, has had a pretty good year this year, except for his stories with Ace. I wasn't that sold on Elixion either. I don't know, I might be overthinking it, but some of the best 7th Doctor in the past couple of years has been the 7th Doctor looking forward in his life as opposed to going back to season 24, season 25. So I don't know, maybe that's like a subconscious preference of mine, but either way, I did leave Wicked feeling like there's a lot of character work just left unexplored and just left on the table. But anyway, what did you folks think of the 7th Doctor Adventures Wicked! I want to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews. Thank you so much for watching. Comment, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And folks, I'll see you all next time.